Anti-Palestinianism is a term that refers to prejudice and discrimination against Palestinians by groups, individuals, or governments. As a prejudice directed at an Arab group that is predominantly Muslim, it overlaps with anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia. The phenomenon is common in Israel, the United States, and Lebanon, among other countries. The idea of anti-Palestinianism has evolved over time, as the political and historical context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has changed. Some of the factors that have influenced anti-Palestinianism include the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, which resulted in the displacement and dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, and the subsequent wars and occupations that have denied them their rights and freedoms. The rise of Zionism, the nationalist movement that supports the establishment and preservation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, and its rejection of the Palestinian national identity and aspirations. The emergence of Palestinian resistance movements such as the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, and Hamas, which have used armed struggle and violence to challenge the Israeli occupation and oppression, and have been labeled as terrorists by Israel and its allies. The influence of the United States, which has provided Israel with diplomatic, military, and economic support, and has often vetoed or blocked international resolutions and initiatives that are critical of Israel or supportive of the Palestinian cause. The impact of the media, which has often portrayed Palestinians as violent, irrational, or extremist, and has ignored or distorted their grievances and perspectives. The current status of anti-Palestinianism is complex and dynamic as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues to escalate and polarize the world. On one hand, there is still a strong anti-Palestinian sentiment among some governments, such as the United States, which has recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moved its embassy there in defiance of international law and consensus. On the other hand, there is also a growing pro-Palestinian movement among some civil society groups, such as human rights organizations, religious groups, academic institutions, and social movements, which have expressed solidarity with the Palestinian people and advocated for their rights and justice. The stance of the world is not uniform or static, but rather diverse and changing, depending on the political, social, and cultural factors that shape the views and actions of different actors. Public sentiment, especially in some Western countries, has seen increased expressions of support for Palestinian rights and criticism of Israeli policies. Factors contributing to this shift include increased awareness through social media, advocacy efforts, and events that draw attention to the situation in the region. The humanitarian impact of conflicts, such as the Gaza-Israel clashes, has also prompted renewed debates and discussions on the rights and well-being of Palestinians. There is no clear consensus or agreement on the definition, causes, and solutions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the opinions and positions of various countries and groups may vary or shift over time. However, some of the recent examples that indicate a possible shift towards a more pro-Palestinian stance include the recognition of Palestine as a non-member observer state by the United Nations General Assembly in 2012, and as a full member state by several countries, such as Sweden, South Africa, and Brazil. The endorsement of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions (BDS) movement by some prominent figures, such as Nobel Peace Prize laureate Desmond Tutu, musician Roger Waters, and actress Natalie Portman. The BDS movement calls for various forms of pressure on Israel to end its occupation and violations of Palestinian rights. The mobilization of large-scale protests and demonstrations in support of Palestine around the world, especially in response to the Israeli attacks on Gaza in 2014 and 2023, which killed thousands of civilians and caused widespread destruction. The emergence of a more critical and vocal voice among some Jewish and Israeli groups, such as Jewish Voice for Peace, Breaking the Silence, and B'Tselem, which have challenged the official narrative and policies of Israel and have exposed its human rights abuses and crimes against the Palestinians. The United Nations and various international organizations continue to play a role in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, calling for a two-state solution and adherence to international law. However, reaching a consensus on the issue remains challenging due to divergent national interests, historical grievances, and the complexities of the conflict. The leaders of the world and the people of the world are not necessarily on the same stance. as there may be gaps or conflicts between the official positions of governments and the popular opinions of citizens. For example, while the United States government has been a staunch ally and supporter of Israel, some polls have shown that a majority of Americans favor a balanced approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that a growing number of young Americans, especially Democrats, sympathize more with the Palestinians than with the Israelis. While some Arab governments have maintained diplomatic and economic ties with Israel, or some surveys have indicated that a majority of Arabs view Israel as the biggest threat to their security and stability, and that they support the Palestinian struggle for independence and dignity.